We're also doing something else a little bit weird. Here's the original Diacomp front brake. And it's for a recessed nut. So this fits flush in the backside of the fork, which was very cool at the time, but on a city bike or a cafe bike or upright bike, it's nice to have the bolt go all the way through so that you can run a front fender. So I bought this brake at Tomcat. The bolt's a little bit bent, that's alright, we straighten it right out. But it's a nice long through bolt. So what we're going to do is swap this bolt into this brake. I would just use this brake, but the arm's quite a bit longer and that's awkward. And this one fits perfect, and it's got the quick release for the front, which is nice. Hold the jam nut with a thin park wrench. Break these guys free. There we go. Now the lock nut comes right off. And then the jam nut comes right off. Then this cool little brake washer. Pop this spring off. This arm, that arm, another cool little washer, the spring and the actual fancy bolt. Get these stupid things out of the damn way. Do the same on this guy. Since I already cleaned all the other parts, I'll probably just put the other parts back on. Not really worry about these unless they're better or worse or whatever. See, this one has a little rubber bushing. And the other one didn't. The other one was grinding on itself. I think someone took it apart and didn't put it all the way back together correctly. Get clean for looks. So yeah, this thing was missing all the important bushings, bearings. Its washers basically act like a bearing or a bushing or whatever. People love mangling old stuff and throwing away the most important parts because they don't really understand what they are or why they're there. The old one. The new ones, and look at that giant gap there where it's not going to scrape or friction itself. So cool, cool, cool. Pigtails out. Put everything back in order. Just loose for now. And now this is plenty long, and while we're at it, we might as well finish cleaning these brakes and get them on. I like these old pads. They look a million times cooler, but you can't get them. And they're rock hard. And they gotta go away. Tomcat gave me some modern Jaguar road pads, which may or may not fit in these brakes. Might go get something else. We'll see. That's the back. There's the front, we just changed the bolt out into. Now, we're going to pop these dudes onto their new home on the frame. Guess it's their old home, really. This is a very convoluted barrel adjuster situation, so this thing is the quick release with a barrel adjuster built in. And they can get all bent and mangled and messed up because they're so light duty, but this one is so nice. No problems. Alright, so we played with the hardware in this front brake. I got a nice little elegant half-round washer that came with it to do the front of this slightly rounded fork crown. The back's the same, so I found another elegant little half-roundy guy. Front through, back on. Lots of extra threads for fender hardware. Make sure that concave on these spacers goes the right way. It always wants to go the wrong way for some reason and get all mangled. Beautiful. So yeah, there's weird old cheap brakes, but they're my weird old cheap brakes, the ones that came with the bike, and they're going to be totally good and fine. Now for the back, it used to have a reflector that also acted as this little half round to pinch this just tube with a hole in it. No reinforcements or nothing, so I got another little alloy half round to make up for it. So the half round pinches the tube, the new half round pinches the tube. Nice thick washer, nice thick nut, and the same thing. This pinch is nice, and there's lots of extra threads in here. About a 1/4 inch for easily installing fenders in the future, which is important because we're in Portland and it is the rainy season. And it is gross and horrible, and can't stand riding bikes without fenders. And a lot of guys think they look ugly or dorky, but man, you live here for a while, you get real soaked and miserable for a while. Stop thinking it's ugly and dorky. Look at all those extra threads poking out. Now I'm gonna see if those new pads fit and if that's the way we like it. Okay, now the pads, sometimes they're labeled left and right, sometimes they're labeled forward, it's forward on the bike. They're always go with the direction of the wheel, because the back's open so you can change it. Slide the rubber out, slide new rubber in. So you put them on backwards, you brake real hard, that pad could go flying out. It's got a little set screw in it, some don't have set screws, sometimes the set screws rattle out first. Well, this is a bit of a joke of a brake pad. Jaguar, you cheap, terrible design. This Jaguar brake pad is it is designed kind of like a Shimano road pad that's adjustable, but it's just not. The thing shakes back and forth. There's no concave washer. There's no nothing. I don't like it. Maybe for more modern Tektro brake or something, this would be fine, but mostly it looks like this is going to dig in and damage my brake. So I'm definitely not using these black Jaguar pads, which I didn't want to use anyways. And I'm going to say I'm not going to recommend them. Usually use like the Tektro pads or Shimano. Yes, the brake pads. And since we got these brake pads, I guess we're finishing this video. Got 10 pairs for like $8. Hopefully they're not total dog poop. I'm gonna go ahead and sand this brake surface a little bit, rough them up so I don't have to deal with that, or shorten the brake in, make them work a little better. This is just a little bit of 60 grit. It's very heavy duty. I usually use 80 for everything, but this will just be a little faster. Just getting that weird dark gray gloss off will make them just all look kind of this mostly even sanded color. Bootyful. So I'm going to put the words up because that's the way I feel like it should be. On there, can't see that. Little words on the top because probably pads are cheap. Not a big fan. I bet they'll be fine. We'll see. Just getting the nut started. Pinch the brake. Kind of get them lined up. So you want to be able to see a rim on the top and barely see any rim on the bottom. Like, I can barely run my fingernail across this without falling off the rim. Because as road calipers wear, they swing in farther and farther and farther, and farther is also kind of up, because they swing in an arc. So I'm as low as possible without going underneath the rim, so as they wear, they won't get higher and higher and start rubbing your tire. I've definitely seen a lot of people who had to replace a lot of tires because the brake pad wore right through one. And they're not, tires are really expensive and brake pads are really cheap, relatively. So, you know, we also want them pretty even with the rims. They're not hanging down on the front or the back. You gotta check to make sure they're even. Look along the top to make sure they're even. So I've just got them on there, probably tight enough, but I know I'm gonna come back and move them once the cable and housing are on there, and I can really pinch the rim, which this is all tightened down and adjusted. So everything's loose right now, so not too big of a deal. But don't send anyone down the street with them on, just sort of like low working tension. Same thing in the back. Do the words to the top. Sometimes pads have a direction because one side can slide out, but on these, there's a metal cap on both sides, so they're not really directional. But you gotta look. I've seen guys squeeze their brakes at the pad, go flying right out because they put them in backwards. Make sure you clean your hands before you do this as well. Don't want to get grease all over this pad surface. Your bike will not stop. And all brakes aren't the same, and sometimes run a little crooked. So this pad, all the way down, hits perfectly. The other side, it's way too low. So never trust anything, never trust your old pad adjustments, really use your eyeballs. I do have tools like this, which can swing around the wheel and grab the pads. So you can sort of hold it in nice and tight for you. Make it easier, it's really a third hand. So you come in here and adjust the brakes better. Or set up on cantilevers and stuff, a little straddle cable, makes it easy to set those up. Or pull the cable, pinch them all the way, pull the cable and hold it tight, and then give them a little tighten down. So now that we have the pads on loosely, we can pinch them when we set up our brake cable housing. So it is ready for brake cables and housing. So I got the housing out again. Same silver brake housings we're using the shifters, because I like your rear brake to be your right hand, so you can signal with your left hand, not go flying over your handlebars if you do a panic stop or something. It's just like a safety thing, and it's more modern and normal. So I'm just going to set this up. And that's about perfect. A nice little arc. It's going to turn with the bar, so it doesn't really matter. Doesn't have to be extra long. Now the rear is a little trickier because it doesn't have a stop. It's a solid piece that goes all the way through and down and in. I think I'm going to come out and around this side. We wouldn't want to go short side because that'd be silly, even though that's how the other brake is. Man, too many things to think about, you know? Goes through all three. It comes out, it's going to pop into this back guy. Make room. And see how much it sags when you close the brake. A little more than that, don't want to ruin the paint. Now, we're at the point where we really got to figure out how we want to run this housing. And I just hate that. We gotta come all the way around. It's the pro way. Do the middle of this. Let's get rid of this Jaguar logo. It's nice and short. It's not too short. Doesn't bind and touch stuff. Cut it right at this Jaguar logo. It's another nice thing about housing with logos. Little extra things to measure off of and see. Of course it's an ugly cut. It's already half installed. Tight, tight, tight. Pokey tool. File this nice and flat. They're already pretty flat, so don't need much. Getting out some cable and housing. And we can see this one's got a short one and a long one. So short one's the front. It's double-sided, so I have to cut this road head off. Fish this guy through this little mushroom ferrule, magically, hopefully. Woohoo! We do have to fish it through the brake lever. You don't need fancy files. This is like a 99-cent file from Harbor Freight. Files only cut pushing. If you pull back, that is dull, so don't just hacksaw it. Push, push, push. This is the most valuable one. It's a regular half rounds. So always use the half round for inside of seat posts. Use the flat side for this. So if you only get one file for working on bikes, just a nice little half round is the trick. Pokey tool, make sure the internal sleeve is nice and clear. Slide, slide, slide. No ferrule. And I don't think this will take the ferrule either. Now this brake has the little pinch bolt. It's good or anything else, got a hole in it. So I'm trying to line this up. Hey, alright. I'm pulling down on it to replace the spring tension on the brake, so my hand is like the spring. Just to make sure it's flowing nice and smooth. Cool, cool. Same thing. Oh. So I don't really use the dikes on cables. You really need a pro cable cutter for cables. You don't want to do it too close, otherwise it'll stay fraying. Give myself some space. I'm going to cut all that fray out. Same thing over here. Fish it through the little mushroom first. And we can pop it through the little slot and this little hole. You don't want to pinch it. Move this up, twist it around, give us as much non-kinking, nice flow as possible. Make this as small and smooth and unfrayed as possible for trying to go in. Pokey tool. and sort of turn it the opposite direction of the fray. Now it's sliding in smooth all the way out the back. I'm going to do something a little ugly here. Kind of see if I can drag these guys out of the frame with these pliers without marring everything up. Yay, alright. Just barely grabbed them. Got them to come loose. Cool. So now we can tighten these stupid levers down. And I got one lever all the way down, one lever all the way up. I like them to both be, I can kind of barely see them. Maybe a little daylight between the lever body and the brake arm. So just nice natural hand position. So I'm going to crank my hands like crazy to reach them. People love them way up, I can see them. I'm doing this every time they brake. Don't let them get away with it. Try and put their brake levers in the correct position. Tell them to try and get used to it. It's way safer. It's way nicer. I had them right at about 4 inches. That one's still a 4. Still a 4. Perfect. Now I just gotta tighten them down without moving around a whole bunch. I'll be able to see up in here. And it's a flathead, which is dumb. There it is. And you can get brake levers pretty tight. Hi, Scout. Hi. Hi, yes, I love you. Flatheads are dumb. They slip out all the time. I don't know why guys used to like them back in the past. The nice thing is we can't get them too tight. If you get your brake levers too tight, you have a small wreck, you drop your bike, you're going to break something. But if they're tight enough, they won't really move unless you drop them or hit something hard. They'll just move, they'll slide out of the way instead of break. And that's nice. I mean, these used $8 levers, whatever, but you know, you put $300 drifters on your bike. Don't over tighten them. Don't break those dudes. Perfect. Should have done that before. Oh. Now we gotta pop these guys back in. So do the same thing. I'm gonna squeeze the rear brake. See it relieving all this tension. Just up and in. In. There we go. Front's the same. Just squeeze the brake. All tension is relieved. And it just slides. Slides right up and in. Why aren't you sliding right up and in? And really set them and pop them and make sure they're in nice and flush again. Crisis averted. Unfortunately, there being no quick release on the back, we had to pop the pads out. If you want to take this back wheel out, it'll probably slide out no problem. You can always let a little bit of air out of the tire and then it'll slide right out. So, I mean, not ideal, but also not really a problem. But like I said, they'll probably slide past these pads. This tire is only a 27 1 1/8. If it was 1 1/4 or even larger, that would be a real problem. It's hard. It's the biggest problem with mountain bikes and things that take fat tires. Is getting past that fat tire without really good quick releases, even with good quick releases sometimes. Now we're going to go ahead and use the brake tension to hold the pads tight against the rims and really see where they are. Really get these pads where we want them. See now where we're at. The pads are sitting way too low on the rim. They're hanging down off the bottom. Not quite high enough on the top. So these pads have to come up a few millimeters. Just gonna wiggle them up. So I'm doing is just sort of squeezing the pads. Get them up high enough. So they're not hanging off the bottom of the rim. But they're about as low as possible before they start hanging off the bottom of the rim. Maybe a thumbnail's thickness, a millimeter or so. We want to squeeze them and make sure there's a nice gap on the top. So we don't want them to wear up and take out that tire. So this is a little lower, this is a little higher. So I'm just going to turn it with my fingers. It's not too tight. Sometimes I put a crescent wrench on here and really bend it to a regular wrench and just angle it a little bit more if we need. Cinch it down. I'm holding this so it doesn't turn. Like I said, worst case, I can grab it with a wrench. Really hold it in place so it can't turn. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, which is the hardest one. That's a real pain in the ass spot. I think that brake's about centered. Sometimes if your whole brake is crooked, you adjust the pads, one too high and one too low, and then when you straighten your brake up, then the other one's too high, the other one's too low. The same thing on the front. I'm going to grab the handle and bring it in, and I'll look. So this is hanging down a little bit too far below the rim, but it's at a weird angle. So maybe just straighten it up a little bit. Also, this brake is still real loosey-goosey. Finish tightening it down. And turn in the jam nut until it's still real loose, but there's not a lot of play and wiggle in these arms. Still a ton. So right there it sort of stopped. Now I can turn the lock nut into that. See, that doesn't make it too tight. Hold this jam nut. Turn this lock nut. And it feels too tight. See if I can turn this jam nut back out. Maybe have to bring the lock nut with it. Now it's moving nice and smooth. It's not really tight back here, so it's not really centered on the rim yet. Let's squeeze it until it bounces and bounces and is centered on the rim. I'll squeeze it to hold it nice and centered and see if we can cinch it back up back here. Bring it back over and look. That side's still more. Maybe we can wiggle it. Now it does have the top springs. They do have the little pigtails, so you can use this old park wrench. The little pigtail holders. Slide in and grab these springs. And yank it up a little bit with the spring. So we're sort of recentering it, using its own spring to turn it. And that worked tight. I don't think Park makes this tool anymore, so if you see one, this will grab the nut on a lot of brakes. And yeah, this guy grabs the spring on a lot of brakes. The Park OBW-3 14mm and weird little spring tool. These are worth having if you're going to mess with any old junk. Okay, come back to here, not hanging off the bottom, real even on the top. Tighten down. Cool. Same thing over here. Feels like it's up real high. Loosen it a little bit. I'm squeezing the brake to sort of hold it tight against the rim so it doesn't just go flopping all over the place. Hanging off the bottom just a little, moving it up, still feel a little bit of a lip. Not hanging off the bottom at all. A couple millimeters showing on the top. Tighten it down, hope it doesn't move. I think it did. Yeah, just a little. And have to hold it. I'm going to push up on the other side so it doesn't move. We'll cinch it up and see what it looks like. That is pretty good. Now you notice there's no way to really adjust the tone on these pads. So what we'll do is we'll test ride it, and we'll work on brake squeal if it has any. First thing to do is clean the rim. Second thing to do is grab these brake arms, the big adjustable wrench or something, and you can bend them to tow them just a little bit. And if we do any bending to tow the brakes, we're always doing one brake at a time. Test ride it, guesstimate which one's the squealy one, bend it in, see if it's better or worse. Bend it out, see if it's better or worse. Then move on to the next one if there's still more squealing. Never just do all four of them and be like, I don't know, because half the time, everyone's going to have them towed in slightly to the front. But really, half the time that makes them worse. They need to be towed in to where they're not squealing. We like them, we're happy, we're double checking. Oh yeah, it's tight. Same thing, we cut this cable, give ourselves just a little bit of room. Inch and a half, 2 inches. Doing the rear as well. Trying to always put your tools away. Pinching some cable tips on so things don't fray. Oh yeah. And the Univega is now basically ready for test rides. So that will be our next step. And then we have to do for grips and the seat. If I use an old black seat I have, and those VO grips, or if I use a new cheesy brown pleather seat and grips that I ordered, we'll see.